So while you're coming on and you see the post, I want you to tag and share. Tag and share, tag and share. We want as many people as possible to be a part of this live feed. Many people as possible to be a part of this live feed. And again, this is our Bible study night that we usually have our Bible study, but I just felt that it was necessary through prayer that we invite out this group of brothers, this panel, to discuss many different things that are going on. Just a word of prayer real fast before we start. Father, we thank you, God, for this opportunity to gather and to discuss, oh God, the unrest, God, within our country and the different things that are going on. I pray, God, for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, oh God, as we go into this forum, touch each brother, God, that we will all be impactful, oh God, and give insight on what is going on. We tell you that we love you and we bless you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So real fast, before we start, I want to give each brother the opportunity to introduce himself and his organization or his line of work or whatever. So we're going to start here.
Thank you, Pastor Bailey. I'm Derrick Harris, Pastor Derrick Harris, Pinnacle Bible Church here in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm excited, I'm thankful and grateful that you allowed us to have this opportunity, and thank you for the invite.
Amen.
My name is Darren Smith. I teach at the University of Memphis, the Department of Sociology. I was asked to be here by Pastor Bailey this evening, so looking forward to the conversation.
Amen.
Pastor Edgard Scurlark, pastor Great View Bible Church in Lambert, Mississippi. Also have a nonprofit work, Great Expectations, where we engage community activity as well as work with school systems.
Amen.
I'd like to thank you, Bishop Bailey, for the invite. My name is Keith Leachman, the founder of Stop the Kill and Cut the Beef organization. We do gang prevention, mentor, feed the homeless. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. So again, we understand that there is so much going on in our capital, our nation, and in our world. And mainly when we look at the execution, the killing of George Floyd, of course, if you are a black man, if you're a black period, but if you are a black man, that doesn't sit well with you because you understand all of the different things that we have been going through over the years, over the centuries, amen, over the decades. We've just been going through a plethora of things in terms of dealing with law enforcement. So I want to say this, just at the outset of understanding that we all have our different views or whatever the case may be. We may agree on some things, we may disagree on some things, but that's fine. I think that it is the difference that makes the difference, so long as we stay within the guidelines of respecting one another or whatever the case may be. I think that is what is going to be necessary. So tonight I just want to pose this first question, and I'm going to ask you to start off, Brother Darron, as you hear this question tonight. How do we deal with the racial divide in our nation, capital, and world, given the fact that we cannot legislate evil in the world?
Repeat that question one more time, Pastor.
How can we deal with, or how do we deal with the racial divide in our nation, capital, and world, given the fact that we cannot legislate the evil out of this world?
I mean, that's a deep question. It's broad as well.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how you talk about change and what entry point change looks like.
Okay.
Looks like in terms of you go enter through the political sphere, you enter through the religious sphere. Which particular angle are you going to approach to attack that issue? And also it's change is local.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we see things happening and playing out nationally, but ultimately, if change is going to occur within a society, it's going to start at the local level, with folks, activists, folks, political leaders, clergymen who are out doing the work of the people, man. I mean, it's about the ground, doing it from the ground up. So, I don't know. That's the way I see it, as well as policy changes as well. So. Somebody else can chime in if you like.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback off that real fast before someone chimes in. You talked about the different angles in which we approach change, whether it's political, whether it is community, whether it is from the pulpit or whatever the case may be. I think what tends to happen many times is that when there is a push for change, many times there are people who should be pushing for the change, who are actually affected by it most, that will push against it. And so, that's what I see a lot of times, even in the pulpit, because believe it or not, we've got preachers and pastors up here. There are a lot of black churches right now that still remain silent on this issue. And we're going to talk about the white evangelicals and all that, how, we should bring them into, the picture of how we should come together and collaborate and bring about change. But again, we can't legislate evil out of the world. So the thing is, and I like how you said it, it's got to start policy with policies. It got to start on a local level, because if it can start on a local level, then it branches out, and other people begin to see it. Case in point, when you look at the riots and all the things that are going on right now, what happened with George, I mean, that is something that's like a wildfire that spread it and jumped over into one city, into another city, and then you got other countries who are looking on. You see what I'm saying? That are going through similar situations, but somebody must take the lead in bringing about that change. All right, so anybody else got anything to say on that?
Bishop, I was looking at this, and even last week when everything started, that Tuesday, I found myself in a corner thought pattern. If you ever want to see an animal at its most aggressive place, get it in a corner and watch it fight itself out.
That's good. That's good.
So I found myself in a thought pattern of sitting in a corner, and I asked myself, okay, so am I upset because of what's happening, or am I upset because of me?
Okay.
Now, change has to start local. Most people want to meet the president, but you don't know who your sheriff is.
That's good.
Most people want to meet the president, but you don't know who your local representatives are. You don't know who your city council members are. You don't know who your local senator is. With that being said, a lot of times people have movements, but their motives are marred.
That's good, sir.
One of the greatest magicians in the world, what they'll do is they'll captivate your attention before they control your mind.
Wow, say that one more time.
One of the greatest magicians in the world, they'll captivate your attention before they control your mind. And they'll captivate your attention with one thing that's happening in one hand, but they're actually doing something in another hand.
That's good.
And what's happening right now, and this is just my personal perception of what's happening, we have a lot of movements that are happening, but then we have so many motives that are being mixed into movements.
That's good.
So we have people that are now donning bullhorns that are saying, make them respect us, make them respect us. Okay, so when we look at this from a racial aspect, a lot of people are racial, but then some people are religious. Some people are religious, but they're not racial. So then you can be racial, but then not be a racist. Let me say this again. You can be racial, meaning that you can be proud of your race, but then you don't have to be a racist, meaning that you uphold everything that your race does.
So a sense of pride about who you are, a sense of pride about your particular race.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah, and I think that's why I wanted you to elaborate more on it, because I mean, expanding the mind is incredibly important to me. Being able to be a student of thought and being able to think in a way that sometimes disrupt tradition.
Yes.
The traditional thought, the traditional way of thinking. But, to hear that is good, I think, because I don't think that we look at it in the sense that people have movements, but they have an agenda behind the movement, and people just rally behind the person because they like the person, You know what I mean? They respect the person, but the motive in the heart is something totally different. Anybody else want to speak on that? All right.
Bishop, just as you stated that we cannot legislate evil out of this world, we also cannot legislate love in this world.
Agree.
And I think that one of the things that we are seeing now, as I even look at this, that this systemic problem that happens on a day-to-day basis, that happened to George Floyd, that spread it like a wildfire, somewhat of like Pentecost, and how we see this. But I kind of see that it really showed me that how God is still in control, because it caught society and those that are in hierarchy. It caught them off guard, because now those that the offended become the offender, and now you have the system that's at bay and begging for society. But as he just stated about how we come together cohesively, collectively, to try to make this thing work, I do believe that as Christians and as believers, there's a standard in which we must uphold in the gospel. And there's only one way that this love can happen, and it's only through Jesus Christ.
Amen. I want to say this. I think in many instances, when we go to bat at fighting, our emotions are flaring. They are up. They are at their highest. But education, I think there's a lack of educating our people on how to do certain things. And I want to say this. I think about 6 years ago, I met you, Brother Darron, 6 years ago. I think that's when the Selma film came out. And we had a mutual friend, LaRonda Shedd, I think she worked with your wife, that introduced us and said, hey man, this dude is on fire. And he has some outlooks that I think kind of mirror what you're doing. And that time we were doing our first Walk for Life in Orange Mound, because there was so much killing. And I just actually relaunched my ministry, relaunched my church in Orange Mound. And I think in the first month of relaunching, we had someone killed right at the corner of David and Derrick right there at my church. And so, of course, we got out and wanted to rally against it, you know, and this wasn't police brutality. This was black on black, all right? We'll talk about that. But, you know, during that time, I wanted to do something more to get involved and engage in the community. And that's when we met, and the Selma film was coming out, and you talked to, I got you over to Melrose High School to talk to the seniors.
Yes.
About that film and all of the different things that actually went on around that and went on in the making of that. So I want you to pretty much talk to us from that perspective in terms of how it has led up to date, and it has kind of like been silent, you know, that level of racism, that level of hate, that level of control that continues to show its head. But I think at this point that people have really got to a point, especially black people, have really gotten to a point where you know, we say, hey, enough is enough. But talk to that, you know, even from an educational perspective.
Yeah, this is a long-standing issue that a lot of people don't understand about history, and even black folks are not really educated about this either. So we're certainly educated by the same system that white folks create. That's the education we get. So that's the education we sort of internalize. Some people internalize it more, you know, to a larger degree than other people. But this is a long problem that started, you know, 400 years ago. It started when, wealthy, elite white men came here with visions to pillage, plunder, take what they could from the resources of the land and its people through labor theft of African people, and of course land theft of Native Americans. So these group of landowners, you may know some of these names in history, certainly not limited to these people, but they certainly had a role to play in this, Carnegie's, Vanderbilt's, these folks, right?
Right.
These were educated folks that came here. There was several people that came here, several different groups that came here. It wasn't just one group, the Pilgrims and the Puritans. You often hear about that story in school, but it was many groups that came in to settle in this new wilderness, as they call it, the United States. They later became the United States. And it was solely, this land was solely exploited for nothing more than the resources that it could till and be sent back to Europe to be used by people in Europe. And it was the same way here, it was the same way in the Caribbean islands, it was the same way in Brazil. It just so happens that some of these areas, as you all know, the COVID-19 is ravaging through even as we speak now. So this is a long-standing problem, and it started a long time ago. What's interesting too is about the documents that these people wrote and documented their experiences. They were quite clear of who they thought should be included in the gentleman's club and who should be excluded. Certainly, black folks weren't in that club. Women weren't in that club, and if you were poor, you weren't in that club. There was a whole lot of poor white people that were in that club. So we often think that white folks during that time had land and bounteous land. They didn't actually.
Right.
Only a handful that had wealth to be able to buy and purchase land were able to do so. The rest were indentured servants initially. Then as white folks complained, black folks became more and more convenient for the slave trade, simply because we didn't know the interior structure the way the Native Americans knew it. Blacks had some amazing resilience to diseases that Native Americans didn't seem to have. There was some of these diseases that were brought, some of these cures and remedies were brought from Africa here and were used by medicine men and women on folks who were in their same slave-holding orders. So these things were inherited and also taken from the black experience. And Selma is a culmination of all of these things rolled up into one. So we're talking about 400 years total, so 256 years of slavery, followed by, 8 years of Reconstruction, which was probably the most, prosperous time for African Americans.
Okay.
Because that 8 years we had more senators elected, there was actually black wealth being gained. Why was that? Black folks had protection. They needed protection against white terror in order to be able to do these things, right? So then when Reconstruction ended, we have another 100 years of Jim Crow. So for about 90% of U.S. history, right, it's been one of chattel slavery or near-like slavery conditions.
Wow.
And so you wonder why people are frustrated, and you wonder why. Not to mention that the death of George Floyd comes on the heels of 2 additional deaths that we've heard about.
Right.
And that's 2 more over the last, I don't know how many years that this has gone on. We only know about these because of
Media.
We have
Right.
social media, video streaming capabilities. Before that, black folks were being killed with impunity.
Right.
And it never made the news. Nobody ever knew. It just happened. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine today. He was telling me about this today. I didn't even notice. He had told me that when he was 5 years old, he remembered his mother coming in the house just crying after being told that her son was shot by the police. I don't know what happened. Something went wrong. He started running. Next, he was shot dead. So he had to live and see. This is what we need to understand. We don't talk a lot about the effect that this has on black men, the psychology of black men, what this does to us. And you talk about change, Bishop. You talk about the importance of change, and the change needs to start inside of us because we need to deal with our pain, right? Do we not deal with our pain? You know what I'm saying?
Amen, brother.
Everybody here probably knows somebody that has had this happen to them somewhere.
Yes, sir.
And even in my own family.
Right.
It's happened in my family as well. So this scourge that's affecting black men goes back to that time period that I talked about earlier, where white folks were constructing an image of America, right, that's still around today. And in that image that was constructed about America, there was a metaphor or narrative about black men.
Come on, sir.
And that narrative suggested that we were dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
right? That we were criminals,
Mm-hmm.
right? That we were lascivious,
Right.
right? That we had sexual appetites and all of these other ridiculous notions about people, but they stick in people's head, man.
Right.
Whether they're true or not, they stick in people's minds.
Right.
People believe these things and begins to govern them, particularly during that time frame when people were trying to justify the exploitation and enslavement of other human beings. I mean, they had to. That's a heavy trip on people. You have to do something with your psyche to be able to live in a society like that where violence is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that these experiences, I think, have led to George Floyd, and I think the culmination of George Floyd's death associated with people being stuck in the home for the last 3 months, scared out of their wits about catching COVID, and being stir crazy in the house, cabin fever, whatever you want to call it. You know, then you got, not to mention, the commander-in-chief and his his army of Republicans that are out there. A lot of my friends don't like me calling them Republicans, right? There's about 30 to 40% of them, they know who they are. The most deplorable people I know out there, keeping up more hell, and truly bring out the worst in the Republican Party. Right? If the Republican Party is still left after the Trump presidency over the last 3 years, has been an absolute nightmare. And as we can see, with the response to COVID and the lack of response to the uprisings that have been going on, and that's what they look like to me, pure uprisings. These look different to me than the preceding ones.
Right.
So if there's any silver lining at all to this man's tragic death, right, is that we finally get to the point where we can have these deep conversations and
Amen.
address these important things.
Indeed.
And we can all learn, like my man Jason Williams says, cry like a man, and we can encourage people to express their pain and recognize that black people in general, black men in particular, we've all been exposed, y'all, to some real painful stuff.
Amen.
And we never really deal with it. We use this is our venue to deal with it, the church.
Right.
We find ways to throw ourselves into service of the Lord, to develop a relationship with Jesus, to feel good about that relationship. And that's one way that we can cope with the realities of being black in America. But until we really get into the other stuff, the pain that we dealt with, whether it be
Right.
abuse, whether it be I would say black people are exposed, and I know this for a fact, black people are more exposed to post-traumatic stress disorder than white folks in other groups, simply because being black in America has been very hard for us over the last 400 years. So until we deal with that reality, it's going to be hard to sustain this everlasting change that we're talking about, to have that Wakanda that we all dream of. So you talked about this earlier. I want to say this one last thing. I don't want to take everybody's thunder, but Bishop, even some stuff so important. You said, talking about change, how do you effectuate change, right? How does that happen? You can't legislate that, right? And you're right. We've tried to legislate it. And where has that gotten us?
Right.
Look at where we are right now. You can't legislate change.
Right.
People have to be, I call it, people have to have a significant life-altering event. Something that has to compel them and shake them out of their slumber in order to see the reality of what it is. Let me say this one last thing. In talking about the pain that black folks experience, you all know I work at the University of Memphis. And I will have to say it's one of the best places I've actually been. I've been in several institutions that have been horrible in terms of their treatment of black faculty.
Right.
So I found Atlanta, of all places, the South. I would never have expected to have such a good place to work at and to be supported the way I am. So I'm looking at doing a study, looking at racial trauma, because we don't talk much about racial trauma, right? And what racial trauma can lead to, which is essentially post-traumatic stress disorder. And what's that? Symptoms of jitteriness, headaches, flashbacks, people can't sleep at night, people are more angry. Y'all know angry people? Y'all know angry. See, anger like that, the anger I'm talking about, y'all know the kind of hot flash anger. You say one thing, boom, they own it, right? That's not normal. That's not a normal response to stressful events. You feel me?
Right.
So if you got folks that are dealing with that kind of deep pain, it's usually manifested in things like jumpiness, irritability, overreaction, disproportionate response to something that's generally ordinary.
So you would say it is not the root of the issue, it's the fruit of the issue.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And in saying that, that's the manifestation of race-based trauma, right?
Wow.
So African Americans are exposed to that. So I want to capture that trauma,
Mm-hmm.
right? And be able to help heal people.
Right.
And one of the ways that I think we can do this,
Mhm.
I'm going to announce this here, but this is an idea that I'm bringing up in my
Mhm.
mind, is two ways. One, through neurofeedback. Neurofeedback is a technique
Mm-hmm.
that's used to train dysregulated brain waves
Mm-hmm.
in your skull, right? So this is real cool science. This is
Right.
great stuff here. So you got brain waves emitting from your skull, invisible signals coming off your skull, even as we're talking right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can listen to those brain waves, and those brain waves have particular signatures to them that relate to a person's behavior and effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your behavior, how you act, whether you're angry or whether you have depression or anxiety, can show up just by looking at your brain waves.
Wow.
So we can capture the dysregulated ones and train them to be more normal.
That's powerful.
We can also train people who have anxiety to be less anxious. We can also help athletes who need to focus more on their game to be more focused on their game.
Wow.
And CEOs and pastors of churches and so on and so forth.
Right.
So in saying that, we can train people without having to go turn to traditional medications for that. First thing. Second part of the study, we're going to take it back 2,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to go to ancient medicine that was being used by indigenous people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Things like psilocybin. You already know what that is? That's
Yeah.
mushrooms. Mescaline, right? MDMA, right? These are compounds that were synthesized from fungi that were used by these traditional societies to take them into a mystical place, right?
Mhm.
And what we've learned from this, in terms of what science has learned from this, we call them psychedelics, is that people who take psychedelics under medically controlled environment have incredible experiences that transform their pain
Wow.
so that they improve, they get better, right? Through taking things that used to be looked at as, sacrosanct back in the 50s and the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But there's been some incredible breakthrough in research looking at these compounds.
Right.
So we're going to look at this, and I want to put this out to the people in Memphis. If you're listening to this broadcast, I'm going to be looking for people who've been exposed to racial trauma.
Mm-hmm.
The events that had happened to Mr. Floyd we're talking about today, or other people who live in the city, in this community, who've been terrorized by the police, or who've suffered from racial violence in any particular way. You may want to think about this study. You may find it to be very helpful in the end. So in saying that, I won't take anybody's time.
Yeah. I want to say this before we move to the next question. This is good already. I think you said something that was very powerful. Everything you said was powerful, but I think you said something that was very powerful that the church does not deal with, and it becomes a controversial issue. And that is, when we want to escape our pain, many times we find a church. We find a place where we can spiritually be empowered. But many times, it's not your spirit that is in trouble. It's the person, it's the man, it's issues that you continue to go through. Deep pain, silent pain, dark pain, hidden pain that you don't share with anybody. And the thing is, we can come in church and have an awesome experience. We can shout, we can receive the word, we can receive, fellowship, but go back home yet hurt and dealing with things privately that we did not discuss publicly. And I think that this is a time where blacks need to understand that it's not taboo to talk about your pain. And I often tell people that sometimes you got to talk it out, sometimes you got to write it out, sometimes you got to cry it out, sometimes you got to run it out. You got to get it out of you. at any cost. You got to get it out of you. And my method is to talk about it. And I'm telling you, I'm just one of them people that, you know, I'm a preacher, all right? But at the end of the day, man, if God dealing with me or I got to say something, I'm going to say it. And I understand that it ain't popular. I'm going to say, because I don't believe in trying to keep the religious face, if you will, you know, just for the sake of, you know, looking deep or doing this. No, I want to tell you, man, I'm dealing with some stuff right now. And if you don't help me get through this situation right now, I'm going to blow the top, you know. So I understand where you're coming from, when you say, you know, somebody that's just, you know, in the heat of the moment be like, you know, and that's not normal. But, you know, when you look back in your past, when you look back retrospectively, in retrospect, when you look back at so many things that you've gone through and you buried them in your mind, you buried them in your heart, and you never dealt with it. It don't take but one person or one thing, one situation, one issue, one circumstance to cause everything that you've ever gone through to come up at one time and you erupt. And I mean, hey, you know, you get what you get at that moment, you know, but we have to deal with this, you know, through forums like this, through case studies like you're talking about and different things of that sort of nature. And I think what you said was necessary, you know, and from an educational piece, you know, we need to be educated. So that means that we got to bring ourselves to a level of submission to sit down and listen to people who know, who understand, because you cannot identify with something in which you're not willing to learn. You understand what I'm saying? So next question. All right, this is good, man. So I said in my sermon Sunday morning to my congregation that blacks are fed over white pride, white power, and white privilege, and we're arming ourselves against it. I'm not necessarily saying bearing arms when it comes to weaponry, though this is certainly one of the aspects of arming ourselves, but I'm saying that we are arming ourselves intellectually and collectively through various resources, including putting legislation in place to stride lawfully against this machine that has been built. You know, and I think that is necessary in this particular era, and in this particular dispensation of time, that we've got to arm ourselves, you know, not just with weapons. Intellectually, we've got to arm ourselves. You know, we've got to move to get bills wrote, you know, legislations written up so that we can be protected. As you talked about during the rise era where black people were becoming wealthy, but you had legislation and you had people around them to protect them, because we needed protection from the machine. We needed protection from all of the evil. You understand what I'm saying? And so, you know, my question is, how do you feel about arming yourselves? Any one of you, how do you feel about arming yourselves against that?
I feel like you mentioned bills. We talked about that the other day.
Mm-hmm.
We have to pass laws.
Right.
They fight us with laws. Mm-hmm. So when you got cops killing unarmed men, you know, you have to put the law in law.
Mm-hmm.
And then we that's how you fight that. You know, you can't, I feel like, you know, we going out protesting, all that is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But when it come down to it, you got to put it on paper.
Right.
You know, so that's where I stand on that, you know, and we got too much going on, Bishop. Y'all hit a couple points about things going on in your head.
Right.
You get to a point where you go back 25 years and you get to that point you explode.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at an exploding point, Bishop.
Mm-hmm.
Cause we got to fight the right way.
Right.
No, we can't fight running down our own communities and
Amen.
homes and buildings, and you know, it's a way to fight.
Right.
You fight them the way they fight us.
Mm-hmm. But fighting them the way they fight us, that's a huge statement, because the playing field is not leveled. It's not leveled. And I think, and I hate to say this, but it's gotta be said, I think in a sense, Floyd's death was necessary to bring the world to this place, all right? And I'm not saying him being killed, but I'm saying at this point in history, for a black man to be executed in a way that he was executed with a knee on his neck, hearing him saying, "I cannot breathe," hearing him call for his mother who has already been deceased. You understand what I'm saying? And then kneeling on his neck 8 to 9 minutes, and you've got people watching, and it is being recorded. I think that is necessary because, like Dr.Darron said earlier, the deaths in which we've seen are the deaths that's been recorded. But think about the many different people who have been killed that have been black that we don't know anything about, that's been assassinated by white people, white police officers, and which is such the case, even Aubrey, going out taking a job, and it being recorded. And I'm gonna say this because I'm not a racist by far, all right? I'm glad I'm black. I love to be black. One of my greatest mentors is a white man, all right? And Greg Hankins, when I say pours into me and has poured into me, man, like never before, it's just amazing. I've got a brother, white brother, Larry Beach, who's a pastor I just met last year, and I mean, we ain't never got together outside of one setting in fellowship, but it's, man, like we've been knowing each other forever. You talk about that history point with white people in whom we thought always were rich, but not all white people were wealthy back in the day. And I had to learn that at Melrose High School through Ann Suter, who my American and world history teacher, who was a white lady. And I remember I had a problem with bringing things together and putting them on paper. So God gave me a creative way to turn my assignments in. I started singing on my assignments. So I would literally put my assignments together, invite my musician to come into my class and play, and I would literally sing all of my stuff, and I was winning every year. And one year she just said, "Look, Jerry, you can't win this year. You've been winning." But I remember one time that we were talking about slavery in America, and the book talked about how there were white people who were standing up for black people and were dying and giving their lives. And I said, "No, that ain't true. That can't be true." She said, "Well, Jerry, yes it is. Yes it is. So I mean, we still must understand that we can't paint this picture with broad brush, right? Everybody is not in the equation, but those who are, we must deal with at all costs. Go ahead.
You mind if I add something to that? So I want to make sure that I understand, because when we have these discussions, oftentimes people say racism, they throw the word racism, but there's no context to it. So the lay public has an idea of racism, right? Most of the lay public believe racism is about individual acts of meanness, one so-called race against another.
Okay.
Right? So if you call me N-word, I call you some other name, then you're a racist too.
Right.
If racism was just that, George Floyd wouldn't be dead.
Okay.
Right? We'd have equal education. Right? The coronavirus wouldn't be ending the lives of black people left and right, all across all major cities. Right? So it would be a different outcome. But that's not the case.
Okay.
And so the reason that's not the case is because that particular definition of racism is limited.
I got you.
It's limited because most of us have been conditioned to think about the world in terms of individualistic ideas. More so white people than African Americans and other groups. Although African Americans do get caught up in that too, because we hear the same stuff.
Right.
Right. And so people say, well, this is why it's so hard for white folks to see racism. Because they look at it through a very narrow lens. Because it doesn't happen to them, right? Doesn't mean it doesn't happen to anybody.
Right.
You must be faking it, right?
Mhm.
You're being overreactive, right? You're being hysterical. So they're sort of second guessing your experiences, and you're like, what? So that can be a painful thing too, is to
Okay.
have people who refuse to hear your humanity and refuse to hear your narrative, your story, your personal story, right? So when I say racism, I want to be clear what we're talking about to make sure your audience is clear as well. So are we talking about individual racism where it's interpersonal stuff going on? Or are we talking about systemic racism, which is broader? Because
That's good.
I want to
That's
clear
good.
the air. When you talk about don't paint a broad brush, I'm gonna paint a broad brush.
Right, okay.
I believe all white people are racist. I'm just gonna straight up say it, including my wife. I'm gonna straight up
Okay.
just say that.
Come on.
Because white people benefit from white privilege.
That's good.
They benefit from it as a group.
That's good.
Whether they poor, meet them in the middle, or whether they're rich. They all benefit from white privilege because the system, the United States, has been set up that way. It's a racial, as much a racial oligarchy as it is a political one, right? So these systems have been set up long before any of us was here. So whites benefit from white supremacy. And because we live in a racial oligarchy, they're racist. That's what I mean when I say white people are racist,
Okay.
right? And I catch hell for it. You're saying all white people are racist, and I never get a chance to explain, this is what I mean when I say
Right.
all white people are racist. So if I support what you just said,
Right.
Bishop, you can't paint a broad brush with each individual white person. I don't know each individual white person.
Right,
They
right.
may be very good people like the teacher you just
Right,
mentioned.
right.
There may be some good white people out there that you all have stumbled across that have tried to do some good work, right? But they still racist
Because they
benefit from white.
So let me ask you this, Brother Derrick, but before you jump in, preach, I gotta ask you this, because you say even your wife, and so what does being married to a white woman in America today looks like, and how do you guys keep the balance in your relationship when it comes to race?
I wouldn't marry her, she wouldn't have had a clue about racism.
Okay.
We had many conversations about that. She had to be very bright,
Okay.
very smart. And before I met her, she knew some stuff.
Okay.
And so she had a lot of room to grow, but she knew some stuff.
Right.
So I could work with her there. She had a unique experience as a child growing up into her young adulthood and then into her adulthood. So, she was different than any other person I've met.
Good.
So we were able to sort of bridge that gap. She's extremely supportive of me. She knows what I do. She knows this is the business I'm in. I talk about white people all the time, including my in-laws. If you listen, and I do it with the most, utmost respect. But
Right.
I'm a researcher.
Amen.
I'm a scholar, right?
Right.
This is what I do.
Right.
This is what I do.
Right.
I may not know much, but I know white supremacy.
Right.
I know what it looks like. I know how it operates. And that's what I've been
Right.
studying and working on living it. That's all we all have. But as you talk about, and you've said so often in this evening about the importance of education, I've tried to use their education to be able to understand what's happening to us and to be able to make it intelligible for people to understand, like others have done.
And
Because
giving
we
it to
don't understand
them or
it.
giving it to us?
Pardon me?
And giving it to them or giving
No.
it to us?
Give it to us
Okay.
and them.
Okay.
I mean, my situation, and I've made many white people mad over the years, simply by telling the truth.
Right.
Just by telling the truth. That these things happen. I don't care if you don't want to hear it.
Come on now.
This is the truth.
Right.
You
Right.
got to embrace the truth
Right.
at some point in time. Not no alternative truth, alternative facts, or whatever these folks are saying today. It's the actual empirical evidence.
Now, I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna let you talk, Brother D. You say no ulterior facts and different things of that sort of nature. It just came back to my mind. We had just really met, and we was in a heated discussion, and you asked me, you said, "Are you a realist?" I said, "I'm a realist." And you just went in on
What?
am I a realist?
realist.
Yeah, you asked me was I a realist. I said, yeah, I'm a realist. And you just went and I said, oh, this man don't even know me, but that just came back to my mind, you know, because people want to take whatever approach they want to take. You know, you talk about the ulterior facts or whatever it is, but the truth is truth, and you cannot downgrade the truth. And I often say, when people have a problem with truth, they try to redefine it because truth is the standard. And what they're really saying is that truth or that standard is too high for me, so I want to bring it down in order to accept it. You understand what I'm saying? So come on, what you got, please?
So Bishop, I was listening to the question as far as about how do I feel about arming ourselves. My father was the first African-American male ever to be employed at the Mississippi Department of Corrections in Parchment, Mississippi.
Okay.
My sister was the first African-American child to catch a school bus on the penitentiary grounds.
Parchment, Mississippi, that's what,
Parchment,
that's
prison,
what's going
state
on
prison.
in prison. Okay.
I was the first African-American child born to an African-American couple at the Mississippi Department of Corrections.
Wow.
I saw my father leave home a strong black man every day. He would return back home a beaten down boy.
Wow.
And he tried to regain the image that he lost at work by resorting to alcoholism, physical abuse of my mother, verbal abuse to me and my siblings.
Mm-hmm.
But in that, I learned so much from this dude. My dad, we were worst enemies growing up. The day I got married, we became best friends until the day he died. All right, so I was privy to also work at the Mississippi Department of Corrections.
Go ahead.
I was privy to work at the Mississippi Department of Corrections. I was there for 10 years.
Okay.
In arming ourselves, you can give all of us an M16. You can give all of us an M16. And it doesn't matter if one of us are a marksman, we can be just a regular shooter.
Right.
And you know what? An M16 in our hand, there's a crowd of people in front of us, 9 times out of 10, we're gonna hit somebody.
Right.
I was also employed in the Mississippi Army National Guard. In my basic training, they knew that a lot of people had never experienced holding a weapon, a firearm. So they sat us all in the bleachers and then they gave us an example of each weapon being fired. I learned something though. They showed us every weapon that we were going to be utilizing as a soldier. But the most deadliest weapon is the sniper's rifle. Because the sniper's rifle is the rifle or the weapon that's used by the person that's not being seen.
Wow.
9 times out of 10, if the weapon, the M16 that I'm utilizing, if I can shoot somebody, I'm already dead. Because warfare now is not fought hand-to-hand combat.
Okay.
If we in hand-to-hand combat, we already dead.
Right.
Me and my enemy, we're already dead because now it's long range. Come here, I'm going to say something right quick. We have to now teach the next generation how to be snipers and not soldiers.
Not saying.
I feel like saying
that's
that.
good.
We have to teach this generation not to be soldiers because soldiers are being killed on every corner.
That's good, bro.
Snipers come back home and write books and memoirs. Here it is. How do we take a generation of young people and turn them into snipers? This is how we do it. We take them back to history lesson. How do we take them to history lesson? We teach them that even though Martin Luther King has been done the captain of the call to the Black History Movement, we got to also mention Vernon John. Vernon John was removed before Martin Luther King came. But watch this here. Martin Luther King, when he empowered the people, anybody could sit in front of him at his speeches, but everybody couldn't march with him unless you sat in voters' league. You had to be trained how to face the adversary, how to face somebody spitting in your face. Because if you can't take it in scenario training, you ain't gonna be able to take it out there on the street. Okay, here it is. In Mississippi, there were 82 counties that were reported with the census reporting. The county that I pastor in, I'm a part of the community, we were number 74 out of 82. So you mean to tell me now we have a generation of young soldiers who are hitting the streets, burning buildings and charring communities, but where are you at on your census form? You see, snipers fill out census form. Soldiers burn buildings. Snipers are the ones that will get up and go to PTA meetings so they can find out what teacher is targeting their child. Or you can find out your child is targeting a teacher, because a lot of times we can say that it's teachers targeting students, but a lot of times it's students that are targeting teachers. Okay, so here it is. So how do we turn this generation into snipers, teaching them, fill out the census forms, teaching them, listen, if you got energy to get out and hit these streets, that's the same energy you ought to have to be able to go up and get a job. The same energy that you have that you are now turning inward, because what's happening now is it's an inward destruction that's now spilling over into our communities. And what's going to be the end result is a lethargic nature of people sitting back saying, what happened?
Listen.
I'm sorry.
No. Your voice changed. The preacher came out. so no, that was good, because you talked about that inward destruction, and I'm just catching you at the heels of what you said, but I so agree with teaching snipers. You see, because we always want to be seen. We always want to get out there and be seen, and we should be seen on many different fronts. But that sense of lethargic, that sense of just sitting back and asking what happened when you've seen with your own eyes the destruction and the decay of our communities, of our race, and ultimately, a lot of things that we go through within our communities or whatever, we can attribute it to white privilege and white power in terms of not being on the same level field. But again, when you look at brothers such as ourselves, all right, who have gone through some pain, who have gone through some things, but have made a decision to take this and weaponize this. When you weaponize the mind, you ain't necessarily always got to pick up a weapon and put it in your hand. You understand what I'm saying? And that's what I'm trying to get this generation to understand. Weaponize your mind. Get the weapons out your hands. If you can weaponize what's in your head, you don't have to carry a weapon in your hand. You see, and that's what we do not do. How much time we got? It's 7:55. We might go over just 20 minutes tonight. But I want to keep this going. Let me see. I ain't bright like y'all, so I have to write my stuff down.
No, you said something earlier. I wanted to say, to come back to what you had said earlier, if you don't mind. You had talked about the need for us to have men to be able to have a forum to share their experiences, right? So for those who didn't know that, in the counseling world, they call that DBT.
Okay.
Dialectical behavioral therapy. Essentially, what you talk about, this brother here was getting into character and was really powerful and passionate about his delivery on the cause of some of these problems that we see with young people. You had mentioned what do we do, kind of how we need to do it, sort of the change. It's acceptance, man. We got to accept what is.
Amen.
We don't have to like it.
Come on,
what
sir.
I mean is that white supremacy and racism, it's a reality in our lives. It shapes all of our lives in different ways.
Right.
But make no mistake, it's certainly your position in life. It would be naive for you to assume that you're here simply because you worked hard and all these other things you've done. Although you've done those things, but your life has been suppressed, relegated. All of us have as men of color.
Right.
We've always been seen as public enemy number one. Change starts with this.
Right.
Having other men who have who steward other flocks across the city.
Right.
Have these conversations with your flock, particularly with men.
Right.
Black men.
Right.
Who have been misguided and mistaught about masculinity. We all think that masculinity revolves around what you own, what you can flash, gold, chains, material things. They don't mean anything.
Right.
In the end, it doesn't mean nothing. In the end, when you die alone.
That's right.
You know, I mean, so none of that stuff matters, but we spend a lot of emphasis on it. Why? Because that's what we've been taught that manhood is supposed to be, right? And so men, because African American men and other men of color, brown men as well, don't have the same access to the resources that white folk have and other folk have, we adapt our masculinity. It becomes a bit more toxic than. I'm not saying that white folks have toxic masculinity as well.
No.
Because
I saw that from a different perspective. We adopt our masculinity. I saw that from the perspective of image versus identity. And oftentimes, because we don't have an identity, we gravitate to image. You see? And so whatever I see that I think I can become, you know, it is this chameleon spirit that I can adapt and adopt any atmosphere, any environment, or anything that I feel like I can become. But in reality, that's not you. And so we are adopting things and adapting to things that's not necessarily what we've been called to.
I would say this. I would agree with you, and I would add this on top of it. It's a coping strategy. Right?
It's a who?
A coping strategy.
Right.
When you don't have access to the material resources that they have access to, they meaning white people, elite whites and others, middle class, upper middle class white folks who have access to things that most of us struggle to have access with for whatever reason.
Right.
Or because we just simply experience discrimination. We may not be aware of it, but it exists. Acceptance to what is our freedom and our salvation.
Amen.
Accepting
Wow.
what is. I'm not saying we have to like this stuff.
Right.
I don't like this stuff. I hate this stuff. I hate white supremacy.
Right.
I don't hate white people,
Right.
because I don't
Right.
know individual white people, but I
Right.
hate white supremacy.
Right.
The system that governs the goodies that white folks get to the detriment of those who also participated in them getting them goodies to begin with, right? And who were completely left out of the whole spectrum. Not
Right.
only that, 100 or 400 years of suppression when it comes to African American men. It's called black misandry. You've heard of misogyny, right? The hatred of women. Now, if you haven't heard of misandry, I'm going to introduce
Somebody
that
type
word.
that on the screen.
Black misandry, the hatred of black men.
That exists now. I mean,
Right?
I know
It's
it
always
does,
existed.
but I've never heard that. Black misandry.
Black misandry, the hatred of black men.
Wow.
By the system, but also by each other. We also hate each other.
Right.
We hate ourselves and we hate each other. Absolutely.
So-
Because like, it's trying to fit a round peg in a square hole, right? This is not our shit. Can I say that? This is their shit, right?
Right.
And so we try to congeal into a narrative that doesn't work for us.
We build it wrong.
Black folk. So we have to develop another narrative, one that's healthier for us.
Right. But before you say what you're going to say, let me say this. Because I know you are in the field of doctors and sociology, psychology, all that type of stuff. So you said something about this is how we heal one another, bringing black brothers together, bringing pastors together with their flock. Now, I'm going to tell you this. We pastors on this stage. Now, I don't know what they experience, but I'm going to tell you what I experienced, and I know this. The cohesiveness and the brotherhood of pastoralship ain't something that is as together as it should be, because you got too many pastors in the black community running with cliques, or, you know, if you ain't running a certain number, or if you ain't cool with this type of person or whatnot, they not coming together. They're not doing it. Or if it's not their idea, it's not a good idea. You understand what I'm saying? Everybody gotta be, you know, the head of something. But in order for us to really understand healing in its totality, everybody must become nobody in order to heal somebody. We all gotta take the back seat and say, look, I ain't got to head the movement. I just want to be a part of the movement. What can I do? We talk about hands and feet. So, you know, just because I'm not the feet, I can be the hands, you know, and the Bible talks about that, in that if the hands say I'm not the nose, am I not of the body? If the ears say I'm not the eyes, am I not of, no. If your ears, you're used for hearing. Don't be trying to see something if you're designed to hear. So I just think that we need to play our respective roles and be able to come together. And as my brother would say, have a sense of divine collaboration. You know, that we can do this on a level that it will benefit us all. Come on, I'm sorry.
Matt, brother, would you mind? Let me just quickly follow up.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of what we were talking about. That's part of what we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about racism being interpersonal versus structural. So I say white folks is racist too, right? So black folks can be racist too. This is how we can be racist. Not in the same way that they can. We don't have white privilege. So I'm saying racism, I'm using it differently. We're racist in the sense that we believe the stuff that's being said about us as less than. Many of us have to decolonize our thinking.
Say that one more time.
You know, decolonize our thinking, right?
Jesus.
Don't you think so? We got to let go of these imperial norms that have defined us. I think that's part of our problem. And it's also defined our existence as black. Man, you talking about your dad. That was deep, man. I don't know about you. My dad was like that too. He wasn't. He was mostly MIA. He died since I've been out here, and so I'm like, you know, I need to feel, you know. But I'm not mad at my father because he grew up in a civil rights, black misandric world.
It took me a long time. It took me a long time to forgive my dad. And my dad was my pastor, so it's too much to go into. But God showed me how to love my dad more dead than he did when he was alive. Come on, Harris.
One of the statements I was going to make about how we look at this system that's played, when you see it, as you go back, what has fluctuated in our communities, when you go back and look at how when the slaves were becoming out of hand and they were going against the master, they brought in Willie Lynch to speak to these slave masters, and his main theology was strengthen the body, weaken the mind. And with that there became a generation to where they taught our African American men to have urinal contests. So with having urinary contests, our communities became funereal.
That's good, man.
So it became so much of an issue as a problem because the systemic plan that was always in place. I always say this, one of the things that I thought about, and I discussed it earlier with my sister, seeing so many of the Caucasians out with Black Lives, Church Matters, and things of that nature. Beautiful, no problem with it. But the issue that I have with it is that does Black Lives matter when it comes to equal opportunities on the job? Does Black Lives matter when it comes to equal housing, affordable, so you won't mark it up, so it won't hit racism, won't be shown within that? And Beth Moore was having a conversation with Charlie Dates, and Beth Moore said that, and I go strong on this, white evangelical have no problem with diversity. They have a problem with equality.
Say that one more time. Beth Moore said that?
Yes.
Beth Moore.
The Beth Moore has a problem with equality, not diversity.
You talking about Willie Lynch.
Yes.
All right. Just today I was reading about Jim Crow, you know, and just from an educational perspective, we've always come up asking, who in the world was Jim Crow, man? Jim Crow was not an individual. The actual artist that sang Jim Crow, it was a song, but he heard a black man singing it, and he took it and he made a song out of it, a white artist. This is how Jim Crow laws came into existence. Jim Crow actually means Negro. You know what I'm saying? So all of these laws, and we've been talking about policies, we've been talking about bills and legislation. One thing I've always said is this: the pen is powerful. That people don't have to fight you with weapons. They don't have to fight you with their fists. They will fight you with their pen. Either they're gonna write you in or they're gonna write you out. That's how powerful the pen is. If I want to include you, I'll write you in. If I want to exclude you, I'll write you out. And that's what you talk about, the equal opportunity, when we talk about housing, when we talk about job, when we talk about pay, you know, and so all of this stuff, man, is important. So let me turn the curve. Let me turn the curve. We got about 10 more minutes. Let me turn the curve real fast. And we're gonna have to do more of this. We're gonna have to do more of this. So I want to talk to the pastors, and I definitely need your input. I need your input, Brother Keith. I need your input at the end, Brother Smith, as we talked about the proposal and everything that you wrote up to Robbins for the stopping of white police officers.
Where'd you see that?
We talked about that.
Okay.
Yeah, we talk about so much. Yeah, so if we can talk on that. Now, I'm gonna say this and we're just gonna go into, so let me talk to the preachers first. So I told my congregation Sunday, you know, we're good as preachers at standing up when stuff like this happen. We're good at standing up to become justice leaders. We gonna take the lead, you know, but what happens, and I'm turning the corner, so I want y'all to stay with me. What happens when there is black on black crime and we're killing one another and we have black people killing black people laying dead at the church doors, but now all of a sudden as black pastors we want to get up and lead a march and we don't say anything until blue kills black. So where should the church be on this particular situation? What should be the response? You in the Harris girl, like y'all preachers, y'all pastors.
So, black on black, blue on black.
Mm-hmm.
Murder is murder.
Right.
Last night, as I always do, I perused through social media, especially with the looting. Not protesting, the looting. And in St. Louis, I think this was in St. Louis, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a retired police chief who was killed trying to protect his building. One of the looters, they're videoing this. This man is literally sitting there with his phone in his hand, gasping for air, dying on national television.
Was he shot? Was he
shot? Blood, you see blood flowing. Now my question to the world, what's the difference between his death and George's death?
Wow. And I'm gonna say this because that becomes very controversial.
Okay.
That becomes very controversial, and we're gonna all have our different takes on that, and we're gonna view it differently. But I just want to say that, you know, in light of what you said. But go ahead.
So, as a pastor, I need to make sure that the message that I give every Sunday and the perception that I present every Sunday is that of accountability and responsibility.
Amen.
The accountability factor of if I am housing a homegrown terrorist that is a part of the destructive nature of the community that I live in, because Neighborhood Watch works in neighborhoods that the Hood watch. Let me say it again. Neighborhood Watch works in neighborhoods that the Hood watch.
Okay.
But Neighborhood Watch don't work in hoods that if I just left my house 15 minutes after leaving my house, I get an alarm alert on my phone and I return back home. I have 4 55-inch televisions that have been taken out of my home.
Now pause. Let me say this on that. Because now we're getting into justice in our own community. All right? So how can that work when in our community snitches get stitches?
Again, turning the mindset of the generation from being soldiers to being snipers.
Right.
Because the soldier mindset is snitches get stitches. But the sniper mindset understands I may have to sit here for about 2 days to get this kill.
Right.
So that mindset of teaching the young people or teaching the church even comes to the point now where we have to understand there's going to be some calculated loss.
That's good.
even standing up for the right thing.
Right.
Because if I'm living in the community, if I'm pastoring in the community, I am paying taxes in the community, but I can't feel safe in the community.
That's right.
Because of the systematic destruction of my mindset of thinking. Here I am, because here I am a policeman. Matter of fact, I can share this. Just on yesterday, I just had some fresh sod laid in my yard.
Mm-hmm.
And the fire department came through and they were draining the fire hose. But however, they caused some of the sod, the pressure, destroyed some of my sod. So when my wife and I, when we pulled up, I'm looking at my yard. So I called and I asked for one of the policemen to come. The policeman that came up, he looked, and his statement was, yeah, it's Bermuda, it'll grow back. And I said, okay, it'll grow back, but this is my yard.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter whether or not it was Bermuda. I don't care if it was St. Augustine. I don't care if it was weeds. But the fact of the matter was, I made a phone call as a citizen of something that happened to my yard.
Mm-hmm.
So when they came up, that was a part of me. That part of me was already, you know, all the stuff that's going on. And I'm trying to say, okay, make sure I remain, you know, professional. So I shared with them. I said, okay, the fire department were still in the community. And I said, well, can I go talk to them? They said, if you want to. My first mind was that, I said, oh, if I want to. Then I said, no, hold on, I'm sorry. Then I spoke to the policeman. I said, no, I pay taxes. I shouldn't have to go hunt them down. I'm going to call the fire department.
Mm-hmm.
However, they finally came out and got everything taken care of. But with that being said, as far as how does a pastor make sure that we teach the black on black, blue on black, making sure that the accountability and the responsibility. Accountability is, you know what, we have to make sure that something is said. Because if not, everything that has happened since last Monday is going to be for naught.
Right. Albert, come on.
I kind of look at it in a on another side of it as well, because one of the things that we harp on with that statement in fighting black on black crime, I do believe that number one, we start in the wrong place. You don't fight black on black crime starting in the community.
Okay.
You have to start with the upper echelon, because black crime is a lucrative business in America.
So when you say upper epsilon, who we talking? Black or white?
All that's in office that support the systemic problem that's in our communities.
But here's the thing. What happens when we go down to all who are in office and there's no response? And I'm glad that you said that, because another thing that I said in my sermon Sunday was simply this: for all of you career politicians and new politicians, if you're not going to hold good to what you promise, stop coming and soliciting the black vote. Period.
I totally agree with that.
Okay.
But all at the same time, that when we bring in those leaders who are with us, who are fighting against that, because here's the issue with that. You and I both know this. We grew up in Orange Mound, the oldest, first black American community in the United States. It's not Harlem.
Right.
It's the Mound. But this was an opportunity where African American men and women have they own their own land.
Right.
Perfect, no problem. What happens in the late 70s, early 70s? What does white America do? Come and filtrate what we used to call that white girl. Mm-hmm. Filtrate the community with drugs.
Right.
Community that where you have no one's trying to go outside. We love where we are, but when you infiltrate that devil, and it caused so much corruption, and they continue to do it. I always tell everybody, even go back and watch the 13th Amendment, how they infiltrated drugs when Richard Nixon, the war on drugs was basically the war on blacks. Mm-hmm. And so when we have a system that's totally fighting against what we believe in, we got to continue to keep making that stand and bring in different views, as brother down here is fighting telling them to put down the guns because there's no cocaine. We don't fly planes to bring in cocaine.
Yeah, but yeah, and I agree with that, but choice is everything. And I say this often, that,
Hold on one second.
Go ahead.
I'll bring it to you. That goes back to the black church,
yeah,
pastors, clergy, not having those, because watch this, it didn't just stop in our black communities. Those urine contests came down pulpits.
I agree.
And now that
They still do.
we can have a church on every block, but there's no unity. And you cannot have a community without the unity.
So, and I say this, and I'm gonna move to you, Leachman, and we're gonna end with Dr. Smith. With the drug issue, just like with any issue, with any lifestyle that we live, it is by choice. Now, sometimes it's by force. You understand what I'm saying? But I've got to choose what path I'm going to take. So in choosing what path I'm going to take, sometimes what I do not understand becomes instruction. So I've got to put myself in a position to receive it because I'm not knowledgeable of it.
But there does have to be someone to show.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So if you are there to show me and I don't understand it, it becomes instruction to me. So once I get instruction, it becomes instructive. So now I can escape the destructive life and live a constructive life. You see what I'm saying? But that comes through choice. I gotta make that decision that I'm not going that way. You understand what I'm saying? So again, just with the church, I think that we got to do a better job, and everything can't be spiritual. I mean, I understand that we govern ourselves by the Spirit. We govern ourselves by the Most High. But everything that we deal with is not going to be a spiritual matter. And we have to stop pushing that, thinking that that's the way we handle every issue, because we don't handle every issue in the Spirit. You know, we need to pray and ask for wisdom and knowledge or whatever the case may be. But those who don't have a spiritual understanding, you know, no matter how spiritual you are, you're not going to reach them. So Paul says, I became all things to all men that I may win some the more. I'm not going to win everybody. I'm going to win some the more. So I have to become, in other words, I've got to bring myself down to a level where I can see them for who they are, where they are, and talk to them so that I can bring them back up, you know what I'm saying, to where they need to be. So Leach, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 at the max, we had a black brother killed up on Airways by a white police officer who eventually was fired. Brother was unarmed. And now we have George. The situations are similar, just in the sense that we continue to see black unarmed brothers killed 5 times more than we see unarmed white brothers killed. But there was no protest, you know, that I know of, not to this magnitude. There was no rioting. And I'm trying to understand what is the mindset of that versus the black brother in Orange Mound who had 5 children that was just gunned down at the top of the week last week in Orange Mound that was killed, and ain't nobody said nothing about nothing.
Well, Bishop, it's George, Brother George. I want to know what the difference between Brother George and the young man got killed in Memphis. Okay, the cop, you know, get suspended, get fired, whatever. Get $3,000-4,000 a month for killing a black brother. Unarmed. Like you said, no protests, no marches, you walk no blocks. Young man get killed in Orange Mound. No protests, no, you know, no press conference, nothing. So I think that they just got accustomed to killing each other. We have our people. I had a heated, I shouldn't go here, but I gotta go. Because it's what it is, Bishop.
Right.
I had a heated conversation with a guy, supposed to be an actor, you know. I'm like, the brother, what is the motive? Okay? When you got your brothers dying every day in your city. Okay? So this thing is isn't got out of control because everybody see a time to run to the cameras, the mics. I don't like these things. Like Bishop said, when they turn it on, it's hot. We got some hot brothers on stage.
Yeah.
So I was blessed to be in the presence of you guys.
Bless you, man.
And I needed this at this time.
Amen.
You know, and I just feel like the brothers done got to where it's cool to kill each other. And I'm gonna jump to certain religions. I don't get into religion because I'm a believer and a doer. And I respect the Jehovah Witness because they hit the blocks.
Yes,
Okay?
sir.
We ain't gonna change the blocks downtown.
Right.
You got to change the community inside the community.
Right.
Now, if you want to change the laws, you got to go to the Capitol building.
Yeah.
But I'm just at a point, man, where you spoke about the representatives and, you know, everybody's part-time. These preachers are part-time. You know, you can't do that.
Come on, sir.
You know, if you're gonna be for the people, be for the people.
Yes, sir.
You know, don't be for the people when it's beneficial.
Come on, man.
You know, and you know, you're down here stirring up things, you put me on the curfew. That's why I got in the game, because I didn't want nobody to tell me what I have to do and when I got to go in. You know, no man tell me when I go in, I answer to the maker. So you cause all this, you know, this stuff in the city, man, and you got to be in by 10. So we grown men, but we still in slavery. So Trump gonna put us back in the cotton field. So you better go vote.
No, that ain't gonna happen. That ain't
Hey,
gonna
Bishop.
Hey, look.
Hey, I'm just telling you.
That goes back to, brother, that goes back to me saying us arming ourselves. The world, I hate to say this, the world will come to literally nothing before that ever happens again. And again, at the end of the day, we can vote, and if people do not hold up what they have run on, whatever they said they have run on, and then they get in the office, and then it goes back to the benefits of them and not the people, then we just elected somebody else who got in office and is probably gonna become a career politician. You understand what I'm saying? But that change, that local level change, I think change starts here, right here, because we are a group of young men that well, I know all y'all, but y'all didn't necessarily know everybody on the stage, didn't know everybody, but now we all know that we're fighting for the same cause, and that's change. And so we can rally around that and say, look, I don't have to spearhead this thing. You know, if your heart is right, your motives are right, I want to be a part of that, all right? So come on, Doctor, close us out. The proposition that you wrote up to Rise.
Chief Rollins?
Yes.
Well, you know, I went to him a couple of years ago. I said, look, man, let's head off this. Let's stop the carnage in the city. Let's do something positive with the university and the police department to head off any potential, you know, any more unnecessary deaths over some. And most of these incidences that occur, y'all know how trivial they are, right?
Right.
Absolutely trivial. And so, and have a proposal essentially looking at testing police officers to see, you know, if police officers have a lot of stress, if they live a lot of stress, most of them do. Most of them have probably more stress than most people do because of the nature of their job. So if you do have more stress, you can actually clinically be able to tell that by drawing. You can draw blood, you can get a saliva sample, and you can see cortisol levels in their bloodstream. Cortisol is a marker for how our body, you talk about your body being in fight or flight response. So when our bodies are in constant fight or flight response, we can get sick from that, right? When our stress levels are constantly high. When people's stress levels are constantly high, your cortisol levels will show. If that happens, it affects your thinking. You can't think. people can't think well, right? They react before they think. So, you know, and if they have been conditioned to see people of color as monsters and scary people and Satan and all that stuff, the tails and all that stuff they've been having, then their imagination runs wild, particularly when they're in a confrontation. If you look at some of these police shootings and you interview some of these police officers, many of them will say, I was scared, I was in fear of my life, and I don't think that's just a hyperbole. I think that's a reality of the situation. These men have been, they already come out of these communities that are very isolated. They've already been exposed to the racial discourses that we all up here trying to fight, that actually that leave consequences for not fighting and for not doing what we need to do. Pastors, whoever's in the fight, we all need to do that. In fact, the pastors actually led the fight for much of the civil rights movements. It's been pastors that have led the fight, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. But the church is suffering from a dearth of people, particularly young people, who are leaving the church.
Right.
So we got to do something about that too. Trying to figure out how to get these young people engaged more. They like the computer stuff. So we got to find some way to connect them with this.
Yes, sir.
But in saying so, I will say that I'm happy that Floyd's death seems to have mattered.
That's good.
When the others didn't matter.
Right.
His death, for me at least, tends to symbolize all these other deaths we've been talking about. It's like, even though the experiences of these different deaths, as gruesome as they may be, as senseless as they are, if change can come about because of his brother's death, there's a silver lining. But we cannot miss, this cannot be a moment, it has to be a movement.
That's good.
People have to continue to beat the streets. They don't have to, you know, loot and tear stuff up, but they need to be out there beating the streets. And the only way to get things done in the United States, the U.S. is the only country that has all these different local governments and regional governments. Other countries don't do that. They have parliament. Parliament's represented by, and you know, the U.S. has a stupid system, in my opinion. We have a constitutional so-called democracy. We ain't no damn democracy. We ain't never seen no democracy before. We got myths of democracy. We've never seen the democracy yet. Right. It ain't happened yet. Okay, because the people ain't truly in charge. Right. It's puppets in charge. Right. You know, it's not the people are not in charge. So this moment might solidify that when the people, and listen, all the change that has occurred, holding these people accountable to their own stuff, has come because of African Americans. It has come because of people of color. Equality in the 1600s, 1700s, it does not mean what it means today. And it would not have, the meaning would have been very narrow had the abolitionists, the great Frederick Douglass, pushed this metaphor, this narrative that, you know, to push the emphasis on equality, meaning equality to have access to that, to have access to that, to have access to that at y'all's expense. That's what equality meant for early Americans, early white colonial Americans. And it was blacks and abolitionists who changed that, as we have in so many instances. We've always been the moral compass of white people, man.
Wow.
I mean, if the nation catches, you know, what they say, if white people catch a cold, black people get pneumonia. I mean, it's always been like that. Right. So it needs to stop, and it starts with conversations like it. And it's as small as it may be. We may have 2 or 3 people watching this online, but it starts with this, and it starts with healing black men. Amen. We can't do nothing if we're not healed.
That's it, brother.
I don't think so, unless we're superhuman.
No.
Although that is one of white people's stereotypes. Seriously, it's called superhumanization bias. White folks this bias starts very early with white kids. They grow up believing that we, black people, have superhuman power, and not like in Superman and Batman and them kind of folks, but in withstanding pain. We can withstand more pain, literally, right?
But we really can't.
No, we can, and this has been shown not only in hospitals. Black folks go to ERs for belly pain.
Right.
they less likely to get pain medicine than the white person with the same pain. Long bone pain here, fractures, less likely to get pain medicine. Why? Because they think black people gonna be drug addicts, right? Or the healthcare profession doesn't tell us everything because they don't think that black people are sophisticated enough to follow the instructions.
And it's been taught.
Absolutely, man. So the change needs to start
Right.
with us getting control of our schools, getting control of our communities, right? And doing it in a way that we don't scare the hell out of these white folks, even more than they're already afraid.
Right.
You know, I mean, they are afraid, man. They're afraid of losing what? Money, resources, power, right? And the more you hold on to it, the more chaos you're going to have. And that's why they hate Karl Marx, a white man, who said, y'all do this capitalism stuff, it's going to go very bad for you.
Right.
And here we are now, capitalism is not working out for anybody because as long as one person controls everything, we'll never have any freedom, man.
That's right, brother.
We will never have any freedom. So.
That's right. Wow. Listen, this was powerful. And I do think that we need to look into doing this more. And I definitely agree with the healing part. Because until we are healed, we cannot fully lead functional lives. I mean, and that's something that, you know, we see in the church. I mean, we got a lot of preachers that are preaching that ain't really healed. And I went through a season of that. You know what I mean? I needed healing. We got fathers that need healing. They cannot lead their children right. We got husbands that need healed. You know, black men, you know, we need healed. I'm gonna say this. One thing I learned about black men is that when a black man finds a leader, whether good or evil, whether righteous or unrighteous, once a black man finds a leader in which he can entrust, he will devote himself fully to that person. You understand what I'm saying? And he does it because a black man, just as any man, but I think more than anything, black men have within themselves the ability to learn, the need, the desire to learn. And many times when you see folks who get caught up in so many other things, it's because they've not had an example. They've not had a model. They've not had a paradigm in their life. And so we look at them and be like, how in the world can they get caught up in it? Because you weren't there. And if you had it, and I think that's what happens in our community. You know, we get information and hoard it. You know, we'll get information, we'll get resources that, you know, $20 million come down the pipeline, and I'm gonna get 20 million, and once I done dried it up, ain't no but 100,000 left. Harris, man, you might want to tap into this, man, because they got a little money left over. You're right, a little money left over, you know. But on the Frederick Douglass and the abolitionist part, those guys, Langston Hughes and Dr. Martin Luther King, all of those guys, when they went to school to become educated, they didn't go to school to have letters in the front of their name and in the back of their name. That ain't what they went to school for. They went to school to get an education so that they can educate those who were coming behind them. Watch this. Not only that, to tell you that I don't care what they take from you, they can never take what's in you. Today, it's totally different. It's just about getting some letters, Doc. You understand what I'm saying? And when it's all said and done, you've done nothing to give back. You've done nothing to become an educator. You've done nothing to empower, nothing to change. So, you know, that's that on that. But this was wonderful. And listen, we want to give everybody the opportunity to give. I want you guys to give out your cash apps or whatever, because we want to be able to give to these brothers tonight. If you've been blessed, all right, Brother Leachman, what you got a cash app or anything? You got a P.O. box you need to send it?
No, Bishop.
All right. Stop the killing, cut the beef. All right, if you want to
Look me up. And I want to say that the brother say you can't breathe. I've been short of breath.
Wow. What's your cash app?
$ capital EDGAR capital SCULARK $ Edgard Scurlark.
Amen.
church. Cash App is $PPB Church, PPB Church.
Amen. And if you want to give to Restoration, you can find us on Givelify, and you can give as we ask you all the time if it's your desire to give. Again, thank you for tuning in tonight. As we're logging off tonight, tag and share, share this video with us, all right? We love you. Until next time. See you later.